This piece is going to be a crotch piece, and it's apple. And I love apple. Apple is probably one of the prettiest color woods when it's done. Now this crotch piece, it's called a crotch piece because, as you can see, the tree was growing this way and had a branch coming off here, or vice versa, I'm not sure which. They actually look about the same size. So there's a lot of beautiful grain in this area because of the crotch, because these branches move, it compresses the grain in this area and makes for beautiful grain pattern normally. Problem with apple is it splits, cracks easily. This piece of wood had been cut for 2 years and had been drying just as a log. 2 days ago, I split it in half and made it round and then went to put it on the lathe. Today, the end pieces have cracked here and here. They don't go all that deep, and I'm going to get rid of them for the most part, but very surprising that even after 2 years of drying, not an overly big piece, that it would still be wet enough that once I cut it, it cracked again. So anytime you cut wood, it relieves tension in the wood, and it can be prone to cracking again, especially apple, because again, apple's very, very prone to cracking. But let's get turning it and see what we can get out of it. I don't always talk about this, but when you're beginning to turn a shape, especially one like this, a crotch piece, it's non-continuous, it can be rough. You can bounce around quite a bit. You can see my tool bouncing around here. It's because I have a non-continuous surface. It doesn't take very long to get around and to get it evened out so that it turns much smoother, but in the beginning, like I said, it is a bit rough. So I left that section in just to give you an idea. That was real speed and the volume was turned on. So you could hear and see just what it looks like at normal speed when roughing out a section of a bowl, especially in the beginning when it's not round. Once it's round, it'll cut much smoother. My tool, I can ride the bevel and I get a much smoother cut overall. So now I've got a little bit more done, and I'm starting to undercut and form the rim. So this piece is going to have a rim on the outside, and the bowl is going to be in the center. So the bowl will be continuous. It'll only be the rim that will not be. So now you can start to see here, the cut is very rough. Again, that's because I'm not getting a good surface. I'm not riding the bevel of my tool, so it is a little bit rough. And you can also see that the bark is still on. On this bottom section of the bowl, I'm going to remove all that bark, and it will start to give me a much cleaner cut. You can also see the rim here starting to form on the outside, and you can see that that is going to remain non-continuous. I did have a little bit of cracking just around that rim, so I just took my tool here and I made the rim a little smaller in diameter just to get rid of those cracks. Now the bowl is really starting to take shape. You can see the rim is better defined as well as the bowl. You can also see that it's cutting much smoother. You can tell from the shavings that are coming off, and the surface of the wood itself is much, much smoother. I still have a little bit of bark to go. I stop every once in a while just to check that. I don't want to remove any more material than I need to, but I do want to get rid of the bark on the bottom of the bowl and also make sure that I have good wood down at the bottom where I'm forming my tenon. As usual, once I've gone over it with my gouge, I then just take a scraper and go across the surface. That just gives me a better finished cut and removes any grooves that may have been there from the gouge. Here I'm just cleaning my tenon up. You want to make sure that that's good and solid because that's what's going to be holding the bowl. So I want to remove any bark. You do not want bark in your tenon. Bark is not very strong. So I'm going to just clean that up. Also clean up the profile on the edge of the tenon. The profile should match the profile of the jaws in which I'm going to be holding it. I didn't show all of the steps here. You've seen it on my channel before, but I just sanded it, and then I take some shavings and I burnish the surface. I like to do this. Some wood, especially apple, burnish well. Just hold the shavings against the wood, generate a little bit of heat, and that will, as you can see, create a little bit of shine and prepare a much better surface for the finish. Always the most exciting part of the project. Here I am applying the finish. In this case, it's just going to be a Danish oil and then a wax finish over that. So, excuse me, not a Danish oil, a tung oil. And you can see here that it's really bringing the color out in the wood. Apple is a very, very pretty wood. I like working with it. It's got a beautiful grain pattern and lots of color variation. Had to work a little bit extra right there at the transition point between the foot and the rest of the bowl, just to make sure that I get finish in that area as well. I'll leave the tenon because that's going to come off later, and I'll smooth that out after I engrave my logo. Here I flip the bowl around and I'll start working on the inside. You'll notice that I left my faceplate on. That's just to make sure that I get it started well, that it's round, that it follows the same axis that originally was done on the outside. So I'm in a chuck with my tenon, but I keep my faceplate on initially, push up against the tenon, just to make sure, again, that I've got good alignment. There's not a lot of hollowing out I can do to the inside with this face plate in place. So here very shortly I'll remove it. Now with the faceplate out of the way, still with the tailstock engaged, just because that's a small tenon, and especially until I get some weight taken off, I like to keep my tailstock engaged. It just takes some of the pressure off the tenon on the bottom. But now I've got a lot more flexibility and range to hollow out the inside of the bowl. You can see I'm not going to the outside. Remember, this has got a rim on it. There is a piece all the way around the outside, and the bowl is only the center piece. So I'm just hollowing it out here and checking to make sure that my thickness is good and that I'm maintaining my rim. Time to do a thickness check, just using my caliper gauge. That tells me not only the thickness, but also the uniformity. I'm getting pretty close here, and I'm also getting to the point that I can do about as much as I can with the tailstock in the way there. The goal here is to cut that centerpiece down as small as I can so that I can just break it off. Still a little too big to break off, so I'll just go in and take a little bit more off so that it'll come off quite easily. In this case, it broke on its own. Just tighten up my chuck to make sure that I'm still good on my tenon. It actually moved a little bit when that centerpiece broke off, so I just readjusted. Now you can see the inside of the bowl is finished. I didn't show the sanding again, but here I am applying the first coat of finish. Sometimes I'll put a coat of the oil on just to get a sense of where I am with the sanding. Sometimes when you put that on, you can see defects that you wouldn't otherwise see. So I'll sometimes put that coat on. I may end up sanding most of it back off, but I can always apply a finish coat later. It's pretty good, but you can see right up in the very top at the 12 o'clock position, there are a couple lines. Again, they wouldn't have been visible before I applied the finish. So now I'm just cleaning the rim up, and no, that is not an optical illusion. The bowl has gone out of round. Now, I will adjust a little bit more in my tenon because it looks like it's moved as well, but overnight the apple has moved. And also a crack has developed, not too bad, and I will be able to fix it, but apple is extremely prone to moving and cracking. Now, I'm doing a bit of hand sanding on this, and the reason why is something you probably shouldn't do with apple. I let this sit on the lathe. Ideally, you turn it in one turn because it's continuing to move on me. And if I continue to go with my tool, you'll see here I'm going to be very thin. If I took this down to smooth this out here, I'm going to be down too thin here. So I'm going to have to sand that by hand. Again, it's moving on me. With this shape and style of the piece, that's fine, but it does make for a little more work in hand sanding. It's also developed a few cracks. Apple is extremely prone to cracking. Now I'm going to fill those, probably with just the colored CA glue. And that'll hold them from then on out. But I don't want to leave that. That's a pretty good open crack, so I'll fix that. And it's a dark spot anyways. It's a dark grain there, so it'll look natural. So I'll just do a little bit more hand sanding and put some finish on the inside, and this will be done. I didn't show, or I'm not going to show, all of the sanding, just what I started with 80 grit. I eventually will go up to 600 through all the grits, but the bulk of the sanding, removing any lines, is done with the 80 grit. And I bought some new sandpaper, first time trying this. It's a dimple disc, and you can see that here. It's good for doing the inside of the bowls, and it's also paper that I bought from sandpaper.ca. It's good quality sandpaper, and I am finding that it lasts better than the previous sandpaper that I was buying online. Here's the inside of the bowl finished. You can see at the 3 o'clock position there is a little spot that I'm going to go back and touch up. And you can do that, especially with an oil finish. It goes well with being able to go back and touch it up. So I'll just sand that area a little bit at 3 o'clock, apply some more finish, and then after I've done that, I will go ahead and apply the wax. So here's the finished product, oiled and waxed and finished out at about 12 inches in diameter and 4 inches deep. Beautiful grain pattern. Again, the reason why I love apple as much as I do, and I do like the overall shape of the bowl as well. Here you can see the bottom of the bowl. Typically I cut a recess in the bottom of the bowl with a tenon, and the tenon is later removed. But you can also see here now the shape of the rim and a little bit of bark that I left on as a natural edge. Here's the very bottom of the bowl with my logo, laser engraved. Overall, I'm very pleased with the way the project turned out. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe so you won't miss any upcoming content. Again, thank you.